following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Golenbock University. I'm Ralph Tycho of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and with us is the man himself, Peter Golenbock. Hello, Peter.
Yes, good evening, Ralph. How are you today?
Not bad at all, other
Excellent.
than the malaise that's going over the sporting world over the passing of one of the all-time greats, Bart Starr.
Yeah, well, he lived a long life. He was 85 years old. As a lot of those Packers are reaching that age. I mean, he's not the first of the great Packers to have died.
No, not at all. Including
Jerry
their legendary coach.
Jerry Kramer died not too long ago. He wrote that fabulous book. And now Bart, who was most memorable. He really was. He was the quarterback during the Ice Bowl, a fabulous game.
Right. And they talk on the news that he was the quarterback of the first two Super Bowl games.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
They weren't called Super Bowl.
No, they were not. No.
That was the NFL championship, and
right.
I don't think it became Super Bowl until was it the Jets that played the first one, or?
It may well have been. I do not remember exactly, but the first one was not called Super Bowl I.
No.
That I do remember.
That's for sure.
And I was a senior at Dartmouth College for that Super Bowl game, and we had a little restaurant on campus called the Midget Diner. And every morning I used to go to the Midget Diner and have steak and eggs for breakfast for $1. And the fellow who owned the Midget, he invited my roommate and me to his home to watch that first championship game, and it was most memorable, and the Packers were spectacular.
Yeah, as they were for like 4 or 5 years in a row. What a dynasty!
Oh, yeah. No question about it. Yeah, that was one of the great periods of football. They and the Dallas Cowboys, I guess they were their number one opponent.
The New York Giants.
The New York Giants, yeah, they won, 63?
Well, they had the Bears as terrific competition.
Mm-hmm.
We had the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving every year. That was the consistency.
Yep.
And the simpler days gone by. I mentioned dynasty, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Yankee Red Sox rivalry.
Okay.
There were two, basically. The Red Sox and Yankees that competed in Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio's time.
Right.
And the later day dynasty, what I think of as Carlton Fisk versus Thurman Munson.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The first one was very well chronicled, as was the second one. But I want your take on how the Munson-Fisk thing got started, and when did the second rivalry really heat up?
Well, even before you get to those two rivalries, you still have to go back to the 19-teens. I mean, the Red Sox really had a fabulous team with Babe Ruth, winning champions in. They won several of them. 1915, they were American League champs. 1916, 1918, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Red Sox may have gone to the World Series in that very first one in 1903. Was it the Red Sox against the Pirates? May very well have been. So the Red Sox were a very, very good team in the teens. Very excellent team. And then, unfortunately, what happens is the Red Sox owner sold out to a man who actually was a New Yorker. Harry Frazier was his name. And Harry made Broadway musicals. And at a certain point, Babe Ruth was one of his star players. Babe Ruth was, he would have been a Hall of Fame pitcher if he had done nothing but pitch. He had a record, something like 90-something and 40. He was just spectacular. But he was the sort of guy who was always pestering the Red Sox. He stayed out late, even though he was married a 16-year-old. He was somebody never, people say that whoever roomed with him say they roomed with Ruth's suitcase. So he was never
as far
around.
back as the Red Sox.
Oh, yeah.
He was
absolutely.
I didn't realize that.
And the other thing, he was always asking for more money. I mean, Ruth knew how valuable he was. He knew what a draw he was. He was a superstar in Boston. He was the star of the team at the point where Harry Frazier sold him to the New York Yankees for something like $100,000 and a $300,000 loan. I mean, it was
for years that was said to have financed No Nanette.
Yeah.
I think there was some doubt cast upon that.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it financed No Nanette at all. I mean, what matters is the Red Sox were without the performance of the greatest player of their time. I mean, even with the Red Sox, he was setting home run records. I believe one year he had 29 home runs with the Red Sox. It wasn't even with the Yankees. Then, of course, he went to the Yankees, and before long, he hit 54 home runs in one season, during an era when, I don't think one of the entire teams hit 54 home runs. This guy was so spectacular. And of course, as a parenthesis, the Black Sox scandal occurred during the 1919 World Series, and they were found out during 1920, at which point, even though those 8 White Sox players went to trial and, through skullduggery, the confessions and so forth disappeared, Comiskey and the mob disappeared them. Judge Landis, nevertheless, banned all 8 of them for life. And so this scandal, which had rocked baseball, could very well have wrecked the game entirely. And the person, who saved baseball from this ignominy was the greatest home run hitter until Barry Bonds, and that's Babe Ruth. He was perhaps the most famous person in the United States during the 1920s. So the Red Sox-Yankee rivalry, in a way, began with Red Sox, basically giving Babe Ruth to New York for money. And the Red Sox fans, really until the year 2004, always had a terrible inferiority complex, when it came to their relationship with New York and the Yankees. It was the curse of the Bambino. Of course, nobody talks about the fact that Tom Yawkey, the owner of the Boston Red Sox, from the time Jackie Robinson came into baseball, refused to have African-American players on his team. He and Joe Cronin, who was a terrible racist. Cronin was the general manager. Pinky Higgins was also a tremendous racist. They didn't have. He was the manager. They didn't have African-American players on their team until 1959. That's 12 years later. And in the interim, in the meanwhile, you have people like Hank Aaron, Ernie Banks, Frank Robinson. I mean, the number of spectacular African-American players, Roy Campanella, Don Newcombe, just one, Larry Doby, Roberto Clemente, these spectacular players, most of whom ended up in the National League. which is why, for 10 years the National League was so powerful, except for the Yankees. But the Red Sox, ended up, finally taking on African American players, but only after Yawkey finally sold the team. And so
not that far after the Yankees themselves didn't take on anyone until
that's
Elston
true.
Howard.
The Yankees took on Elston Howard in 1954, which is
56.
again I think it was 54. I do believe that's 7 years. 7 years after Robinson came up. They kept him in the minors. And he really, it bothered him terribly that they didn't allow him to play, for quite a few years.
And how much it bothered him that he was never a Yankee manager too.
Well, absolutely. His wife wrote a spectacular book about Ellie, and basically said that baseball killed my husband, which is probably true.
Yeah.
The Yankees could have hired him to be the manager, and they never did, and neither did anybody else. But the Yankees did not need African American players nearly as much as the Red Sox did. The Red Sox had terrible teams throughout the 50s and throughout most of the 60s, and the Red Sox did not come into sort of a championship quality until 1967, when they had that magical season where Carl Yastrzemski went crazy and won so much. So you were talking about the fact that Joe DiMaggio was the star for the Yankees and Ted Williams was the star for the Red Sox. And the moment when the Red Sox might well have ended up winning the pennant, there were 2 years. One was 1948 and the other was 1949. The Yankees ended up in let's see, in 48. Cleveland, was it Cleveland that won the pennant that year? And the Red Sox just missed.
48.
And in 1949, the Red Sox were a game ahead of the Yankees with 3 to go, or 2 to go, and the Yankees won the last 2 games against the Red Sox. DiMaggio helped win those games. And so, and Joe McCarthy, who had been the great Yankee manager all those years until he was fired for his alcoholism, ended up being the Red Sox manager. And in that last game, McCarthy pitched somebody who nobody expected he would pitch, and the guy got clobbered. And the Yankees ended up winning the pennant in 49 under Casey Stengel. And of course,
his
at that
first
point,
year.
yep.
Casey's
and at that point, Casey Stengel ended up winning 5 in a row, lost 1, and then won 5 in a row more. So, in terms of the rivalry between the Red Sox and the Yankees, yes, certainly there was that rivalry. I mean, DiMaggio was so spectacular, and Ted Williams was equally spectacular. But
there was that story that you relate in the book about that those teams. Wasn't DiMaggio and Williams traded for each other?
Well, there was one night when one of the Yankee owners, and it may have been Del Webb, got together with Yawkey. It was George Weiss, the general manager, got together with Yawkey, and the two of them started drinking. And they got, fairly drunk that night. And at that point, they thought, well, it makes more sense. DiMaggio is a righty, and imagine how many home runs he would hit if he were playing in Fenway Park. And Ted Williams, who's a lefty, imagine how many home runs he would hit with the short porch in Yankee Stadium. Why don't we swap Ted Williams for Joe DiMaggio? And then when they woke up the next morning, they thought about it and rethought about it, decided, we better just leave things well enough alone. And so they never did make that trade. If they had made it, it would have been one of the most spectacular trades in baseball history.
And what got me from a personal standpoint, it would have reunited or united the DiMaggio brothers.
It would have, yes.
I wonder which one of them would have taken to left field. Was Dom as good a fielder as Joe? Was he better?
I mean, it's a marvelous question. It's a terrific question. I mean, Dom DiMaggio was the spark plug of that outfield. You know, he had Ted Williams in left, and though Ted was a pretty good fielder, Ted really didn't focus all that much on his fielding, and so balls hit up the alley. Dom DiMaggio was responsible for going over and getting it, and he also had a long way to run in right field as well. I don't know. I mean, in the All-Star games, who played center field? Was it Dom or was it Joe? My guess it was probably Joe. I mean, Joe was absolutely spectacular.
Yeah.
Joe had what was Joe's lifetime batting average? It was very high, 325.
It was very high, and if I'm not mistaken, he hit more home runs, or almost as many home runs, as he struck out.
No, that's right. That's right. He hit more home runs than he had strikeouts. That was the thing about him. It was uncanny. Well,
absolutely.
I mean, Joe DiMaggio hit in 56 straight games, which is just impossible to believe, considering that when he was in the Pacific Coast League, he hit in something like 80 straight games. I mean, he had a huge string like that in the minor leagues. And at the same time, Ted Williams in 1941 hit 406, and Ted was the last player to ever hit over 400. So that's part of their rivalry too, as to who was going to be the most valuable player in the league. And Ted was interesting because he was not somebody who stood fools easily, and he had no respect for many of the writers of the Boston Press, who were really nasty people. And so very often when the MVP voting came up, these people didn't even give Ted Williams the courtesy of placing him 10th. And he lost at least one MVP balloting because the hometown guys wouldn't put him on the ballot at all.
Right, which is crazy. He looked at it as a popularity contest, and I don't think he was all that upset about that. He got his kudos.
Yeah.
And it remains that way. These awards are given to guys based on reputation, especially Gold Glove nominees and winners. Very unfair.
That's okay. That's all right. It's all right.
Gives us something to talk about.
Mm-hmm. So you wanted to talk about the Yankees and the Red Sox battling in the 70s, in the 1970s.
Yes, and Carlton Fisk.
So the Red Sox won the pennant in 75. Didn't win the World Series. Let's see. The Yankees won the pennant in 76, 77, and 78. And 78 was obviously my Bronx Zoo year. That was, one of the great.
Sparky.
I got to experience all of that with Sparky Lyle. He and I spent that year talking to each other at great length, and it was something to behold. Where the Red Sox had a 14-game lead in August over the Yankees, and manager Don Zimmer, he had a pitcher by the name of Bill Lee, who I love. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. Lives up in Vermont right now, and Bill Lee called Don Zimmer the gerbil, which absolutely infuriated. I mean, just absolutely infuriated Zimmer. So Zimmer decided with his 14-game lead that he could win the pennant without Bill Lee. It sat him. And, of course, we know the rest of the story. It didn't work out that way. And by the end of the year, the two teams were tied, and they had to play a one-game playoff. And Bucky Dent hit a home run, a 3-run home run in that playoff game to defeat the Red Sox. And from that year until 2004, most of New England was seeing psychiatrists. I mean, all those Red Sox fans just headed straight for the doctor's couch because it made them crazy.
There were people who were born and died Red Sox fans.
Oh yeah.
And lived to ripe old ages and never saw them win.
Never saw them win a World Series. When I have a close friend of mine, Bart Starr, who was sports editor of Newsweek, and when the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004, he took the paper the next day, went to his father's grave, and took that paper and put it face down so that his father could read it.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a very nice gesture.
Yeah.
And it kind of says it all. Who is the better catcher, Fisk or Munson?
Comparative, big comparatives, serve no purpose. Fisk is in the Hall of Fame. Thurman was a little short of that. I'm not sure why. He was kind of beat up at the end. His hands were all beat up. He had played a lot. He was the heart and soul of that Yankee team. I mean, I'm not quite sure why he's not in the Hall of Fame. Yes, he certainly died in that plane crash, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe if he had played a couple more years, and not died that way, people would talk about him for the Hall of Fame. But for some reason, he's sort of like Mattingly. Mattingly certainly had a marvelous career, but they say that Mattingly fell short, and they say the same thing about Munson, that Munson fell short. But if you talk to the Yankee teammates, if you talk to them, as far as they were concerned, especially the pitchers, I mean, Munson was the heart and soul of that ball club.
Yeah. Hey, Peter, thank you for another great session. And
anytime.
You are the number one man in the Peter Golenbock family. But we must mention you're a man of two Wendy's.
I am.
You told me once that your parents named you and your sister, Wendy, who's my Facebook friend, after Peter Pan.
That's right. Well, I was named after Peter Pan, and she was named after Wendy in the book Peter Pan.
Right. That's right. What I meant, of course.
Yeah, right.
And that instilled in you, I think, that attitude of there's a little child in all of us, and to keep that alive is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
And then, as a coincidence, you married a Wendy.
I did.
Right.
I did.
So you
a wonderful person.
More Wendy's than practically all of us, and twice as many as those who do have.
I am lucky twice.
All right.
Yes.
Pay homage to those two, and you have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you when we do.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Peter Golenbock, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tycho, the weak link of it all. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Hello, everyone. This is Rob Deininger with Comfortably Zoned Radio, and I'm here with Jack Degraw, and we're talking Yankees baseball. How you doing, Jack?
Good. How are you today, Robert?
I'm doing pretty good. Have a good Memorial Day weekend?
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice down here in Florida. It's about 102 with the heat index, but it's better than a hurricane, so can't complain.
Yeah, we had good weather here up in Jersey. It was 80 Saturday, Sunday, and 80 yesterday. It felt warmer, but great weather for being out.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and Yankees they're 8-2 in their last 10 games, and they got a 2-game lead over the Rays, a 6.5-game lead over the Red Sox, and they're coming off a road trip where they went 6-1 and almost went 7-0. I mean, they're rolling.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Robert. I've been watching the Yankees. I've been a Yankees fan since '64, and I'll tell you, this team is as much fun to watch as any team I remember. I mean, they're really overachieving, and they're just a lot of fun to watch. You know, it's old-time baseball. It's just not home runs. They hit singles, doubles, they steal bases, they move runners up, they hit sac flies. It's really a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and then they're getting it from different players. I mean, like you said, Clint Frazier is been hitting the ball well. Sanchez is hitting home runs again. What's his name? Brett Gardner's batting .450 in his last 8 games. I mean, they're getting production up and down the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, it's really something to watch. And, I mean, this Ursula kid, when he gets up with the bases loaded or, you know, men on base scoring position, he comes through like almost every time. It's amazing.
And that was something I was thinking about earlier was we got Didi coming back soon. And with Urshela and LeMahieu, one of those guys are going to see less at-bats. Do you think who do you think is going to be playing third base when Didi gets back and Torres moves back to second?
Well, you know, LeMahieu has more of a track record. You know, he's been a regular. He was a batting champion in the National League. Urshela, you really don't know because he's you know. He doesn't have a long track record in the major leagues. And, you know, you don't know when, you know, this great play will, you know, cease to exist. But my guess is, you know, they'll find a way to get them both in the lineup. But yeah. I think, you know, Urshela is mainly a third baseman. LeMahieu can play all around, but I think you'll see LeMahieu.
Yeah, because, I mean, Didi really, he's coming back early. I mean, they didn't think they would have him back until after the All-Star break, or at least sometime around it. And he's making fast progress, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was down here in Tampa here over the weekend, and he hit a home run on Sunday with the Tampa Tarpons, and I believe now he's in AAA with Scranton, so he should be back by the middle of June, and, you know, they weren't expecting him back till late July or August.
Yeah, and Paxton, if the doctors clear him, I guess he'll be pitching tomorrow. So we'll be getting him back, hopefully.
Yeah, he'll be pitching tomorrow, and I heard Betances is going to start throwing off the mound, so he should be back shortly. CC could start Sunday. And another thing, you know, I'd like to talk about, Robert, is Herman. You might see Herman go on the DL in a few weeks, you know, just to shut him down for a while, because I was looking, he threw 85 innings last year. He's up to like 60 plus this year. So, I mean, you know, how many innings are you going to throw the kid? 130, 140 innings? Because if he keeps at the pace he is now, you know, by mid-August, you know, he really can't do much for you. And just one more thing, Robert, the Yankees signed this guy, Randall Delgado. He's an 8-year veteran in the National League. He pitched with Atlanta, Arizona, and he's been in 271 games. He got an earned run average over 4. He pitched for Scranton yesterday. So there's a chance you might see him coming up, you know, like the way they've been using Chance Adams and David Hale and that Cortez guy. You might see him come up shortly.
And I think you're right about Herman, because the last 2 outings especially the last outing, he's given up 10 runs in 10 innings on 14 hits. And I think, you know, this is something that they're going to definitely have to monitor. So I think you're dead, you know, you're dead on with him probably going on a DL at some point just to save him.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Lozaga, isn't he on like the 60-day disabled list? And
yeah.
And there was talk of them signing. Yeah, there was talk of them signing Kutchel, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think somewhere down the line you'll see him, you know, get another starter.
Yeah, so Dallas Keuchel, I guess, had a workout. And apparently he looked good, and the 2 teams I keep hearing that are looking at him are the Yankees and the Atlanta Braves. I mean, I've always thought he'd be a nice addition if the Yankees could get him at the price they want him for.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, what he's going to ask for. I mean, does he just want to pitch for the rest of the season and then go through the free agency again, or are the Yankees going to maybe offer him a 2 or 3 year deal? And it'll be interesting to see what happens. But if he's going to help you get into the series and possibly win a series, he's worth every dime you can spend. They can make those millions back 10 times over.
And is there anything new on Judge? I thought I heard that he's actually doing really well. There was an article the other day, but I didn't get a chance to read it.
The last I heard, he was throwing over the weekend in Kansas City, the most he's thrown since he got on the DL, and he's been standing in the batter's box tracking pitches, and it's possible on this homestand he could start taking batting practice. So, there's a chance he could be back, maybe in 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, because like Clint Frazier, I mean, he's proven that he belongs in the major leagues. And when Stanton comes back and then eventually Judge, there's not going to be any room for Frazier. What do you think could happen with him? Do you think he could be trade bait or traded at the deadline for someone?
Well, the thing is, Robert, personally, I don't want to see him traded. Because
neither do I.
I don't know. I mean, this could be the last year of Brett Gardner with the Yankees. I mean, Brett can still play. I'm sure he'll be, playing for another 2 or 3 years. I love Frazier's bat, and I don't want to see him, give that away. So I don't know.
Because when he got
a lot of tough decisions to be made.
Yeah, because when he got off the DL, he was struggling a little bit, but in the last 7 games, he's batting .385 with 4 home runs, 10 RBIs. He's hitting like he did before he went on the DL earlier. And like you said, I love his bat. I mean, he's got great bat speed. I mean, he really can turn on an inside pitch when pitchers make a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, you can't teach that bat speed. I mean, he can carry a team with his bat. The only question now is like his fielding. And I think, Rob, the injury he had last year, hitting his head, having that terrible concussion, it's made him a little gun shy around the fences.
Yeah, you saw that in Kansas City a couple times where you could tell he was worried about the wall and running into another fielder.
Yeah, and when if you went through what he went through, I can understand that. I think he's more of a left fielder. That's what I think. I think of all the outfield positions to play, the hardest is right field because, the ball just, comes off the bat different. Center field, you can see the ball coming off the bat, and left field, it'll, a curve towards you. But, right field, it just curves away from you. You got to worry about the center fielder, and it's just, I think it's a harder position to play right field.
Yeah. And with the Yankees schedule, they got 2 more against San Diego after winning the opener yesterday. But this month of June, they're going to get into some tough series. I mean, they got Boston coming up, Cleveland, and then they play the Mets, the Rays, the Astros, all in June. I mean, they got some tough clubs to play in June, and it's going to be interesting to see how the AL East unfolds at the end of June, going into the All-Star break. Because a lot of people said,
go ahead, Robert.
Everyone thought this would be a 2-team race between the Yankees and Red Sox, but the Tampa Bay Rays have shown they're a pretty good team. They could be there the whole season, don't you think?
Yeah, Robert, I see them winning 90-plus games. And, the thing is, you could have, of course, you have a division winner in the Yankee division, but you could have the Red Sox and the Rays as a 2 wild card team, or the Yankees as a wild card team. So, there's not really a lot of strong teams in the American League. There's only like 6 teams now with winning records.
Yeah.
So, there's not a lot of strong teams.
And I'm surprised we got a 6.5 game lead over the Red Sox, but only a 2 game lead over the Rays, and we've been playing great baseball. And I am a little worried that with some of the guys getting healthy and coming back, that it might upset the kind of balance that we have in the lineup right now. Do you have any concern about that at all, or am I just being a little paranoid?
No, I agree with you, Robert, because I think you don't want everybody coming back at once. I mean, Didi's a good hitter. Didi don't do too much striking out. But, I mean, if you get Judge back at the same time and Stanton and, Sanchez strikes out a lot. So that, that really could, they could struggle for a while, with, leaving men on base and strikeouts and stuff. And you get back to, modern baseball, with home runs and strikeouts.
Yeah, because we got a homestand with San Diego and Boston, and then we go on the road again to Toronto and Cleveland, and then come back home to face the Mets in interleague play. But June is definitely a tough month. We're going to find out who's going to be taking control of this division, I think, by the end of the month.
Yeah, the Yankees haven't played a lot of teams with winning records. So, when you got Tampa Bay and Houston, like 7 games in a row in the middle of the month, we'll find out.
And also, Bill Buckner passed away. And even though it's very unfortunate, I'm glad to see that people are talking about how good of a player he was, because a lot of people remember him from the '86 World Series with the Mookie Wilson's ball rolling under his glove, but he was actually a really, really good player, a great player, really.
Yeah, he was an outstanding hitter, and I think people forget early in his career he was fast. He played the outfield and stuff. He could really run. So I think he got hurt in this World Series. I believe it was '74 against the A's. He slid in the third, and I think he broke his ankle, or he suffered a bad sprain. And for the last 16, 17 years of his career, he could barely run. But he was a terrific player.
Yeah, and the stat that I heard this morning on him, that he never struck out more than twice in a game, just blows my mind considering today's game. It's not surprising to see someone strike out 3 times in a game, or sometimes 4. And he never struck out more than twice in his whole career in a game.
No, and I mean, if you look at his career, especially with the Cubs, I mean, he was a terrific player with the Cubs from I think 77 through 84. And, getting back to the '86 series, I mean, the Red Sox had the two-run lead in the 9th inning. And, Bob Stanley blew that game. And McNamara should have never had Buckner in at first base. All year, they had Dave Stapleton come in as a defensive replacement. But people forget another thing, the Red Sox they're like the Yankee team now. They hit a lot of home runs and stuff, and they left a lot of men on base. And even in the 7th game, they had a 3-0 lead, and they left the bases loaded like 2 times, and they just could never get that hit. So it's kind of it was kind of a sad thing to see. Buckner's just remembered for that era, because he was a great player. And another thing, Robert, even if he caught that ball, nobody was there to cover first base. There's no guarantee who would be Mookie Wilson the first. So,
And he had over 27 career hits. And if he didn't break his ankle early in his career, do you think there's a chance he might have gotten the 3,000 hit club?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because there's an average, you get 12, 15 hits a year, and I mean, that he couldn't run at all. So there's a good possibility he would have, had 3,000 hits.
Yeah, I mean, he was 69 years old when he passed away. I mean, you think about that, it seems young now.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite a shock there, yesterday when I seen it on the computer, because, 69 is way too young. And, I didn't hear anything about him even having any illnesses or anything.
Yeah.
So, it was definitely a shock.
And jumping off the topic of baseball real quick and going into football, are you a Giants fan?
Well, Robert, I'm actually a Packer fan. So I just want to say rest in peace to Bart Starr, because when I was growing up, he was a favorite of mine. The first game I remember watching was a 65 championship when the Packers beat the Browns 23-12, and Paul Hornung and Jim Taylor, and that was Jimmy Brown's last game. But getting back to what you were saying, now I always liked the Giants, but I've always been a Packer fan.
Yeah, and Bart Starr, I think the most it was a completely different game when he played. And for people who don't know, he was like the Tom Brady of his era. I mean, he called his own plays, right? I mean, even though Vince Lombardi was the head coach, it was Bart Starr who called the plays, right, as quarterback? Yeah,
and an interesting thing, Robert, when they had the Ice Bowl and Bart Starr ran in for the quarterback sneak, the play in the huddle was they were going to give the ball to Chuck Mersine. And Mersine was going to, run with the ball, but Starr seen something in the defense. He's seen an opening, and, he took it in for the winning touchdown. And a couple things about Bart Starr. He was 9-1 in championship games. In 1960, the Packers lost to the Eagles, and when they lost the game, they were inside the 10-yard line. But in 61, they beat the Giants, the Packers. 62, they beat the Giants. 65, the Browns. 66, the Cowboys. 67, the Cowboys. He won the first two Super Bowls. They beat the Chiefs and the Raiders. So Bart Starr was like 9-1 in championship games. So he was definitely one of the greatest quarterbacks ever.
Oh, definitely. And I just saw a piece on him this morning on ESPN. I guess he suffered a stroke a few years back, and in 2014, I think it might have been.
Yeah, he's been sick for a couple years, because I remember he come back to Green Bay a few years back, and I seen pictures of him, and he looked really bad.
Yeah, he did a special not too long ago. He penned a letter, I guess, to Aaron Rodgers, and ESPN's going to be doing a special on him, about how he supported the quarterbacks over the years, like Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. He really has been a staple of Packers history. He's always been there. It's his big loss.
Yeah, I mean, after his playing career, he was a Packer head coach. Right, I believe 7 or 8 seasons. They had a lot of losing seasons, but I remember they did get in the playoffs one year. But Bart Starr is he'll always be loved in Green Bay, and he was a special person as well as being a great quarterback.
Yeah. And for me as a Giants fan, I love Eli Manning, and I feel the Giants have wasted the second half of his career. And to see the fans sort of wanting to push him out the last couple of years, it hurts, because it really hasn't been on him. I mean, they haven't supported him with any kind of protection or a run game. And I feel this is they're going to be pushing him out this season. He even canceled his weekly radio show this year because he sees the writing on the wall. If they don't win early, he's going to be replaced by the rookie they drafted, Daniel Jones. And I just hate to see his career ended the way his began.
Well, let me. What do you think, Robert? I mean, if they're like, 3-3 or 4-3, and they still have a chance for the playoffs, I think they'll keep Manning in. But if they're like 1-6, I think just like you were saying,
yeah,
I think they'll go into there.
Because the Giants right now, I mean, they're going to have one of the most, for 2020, they're going to have a huge salary cap. They're going to be able to sign a lot of players next year. And I think they're going to want to get the rookie quarterback in just to get him just to get acclimated to the NFL so that they're ready to go in 2020, which is why I think Eli and the Giants will have to win for him to stay in. And their bye week is week 11. So, I mean, as long as I think they're in contention for a wild card or the division at least, I think they might have to stick with Eli just because it would look bad and it would upset the fans. But if they're struggling, then he'll be replaced.
Have they done anything, Robert, with the offensive line? Have they signed any guys? Or?
They traded Olivier Vernon, their defensive end, and they picked up Ziegler from a right guard from the Browns in the trade. He's one of the best guards in the NFL, and they signed Mike Remmers for right tackle. I mean, the offensive line should be a lot better this year. It really should. I don't think the Giants will have a problem putting up points. Last year in the second half of the season, if you take away the Tennessee game, they averaged over 32 points a game. They were able to put up points. And even the last 4 games of the year without Beckham, they scored their most points in a game in games all season. So I think offensively they should be fine. It's defensively, can they stop opponents from scoring? I mean, they were brutal last year against the run and against the pass, and they let a lot of players go. And that's they're going to have to outscore their opponents, I think, in order to win.
Have they done anything with the defense? Have they signed anybody or anybody with the draft?
They did get Jabril Peppers from the Browns in a trade. They drafted a defensive tackle with the 17th pick out of Clemson, this guy Lawrence. He's a big guy, but he's only a 2-down player. I mean, if he turns out to be a good player or a great player, he'll be Snacks Harrison, who they traded away last year. They did address the defensive end position in the draft, but it was later on in the draft. They did sign someone who played with the Cardinals, I think, who's coming off injury, who might, I can't remember his name, but he could be a good player. But right now, I mean, defensively, it just doesn't look good.
How about the rest of the teams in the division? The Eagles are good. The Cowboys, I mean, you think the Giants realistically have any shot at all at the playoffs?
Offensively, I think they scored the most points in the NFC East last year, but they also gave up the most points in the NFC East. So hopefully they do have a relatively weaker schedule this year. It's one of the weaker schedules in the NFL. So I think they could win enough games to compete for the division or at least a wild card. I mean, their offense should be able to put up points. I mean, they really show with the offensive line, and Saquon Barkley is the real deal. He's a generational talent at running back. And with a running game and Eli with time to throw, he can still complete passes. He can still make all the throws. There's not a defense he hasn't seen or beaten. So, I mean, they will put up points. It's just if this collection of players they got on defense can come together and make a few stops at the end of the game. Because last year we lost 8 games by 7 points or less, and 5 of those games by 3 points or less. And 4 losses came in the final 2 minutes of the game. So if we could just make some stops late in the game, I think we'll be able to compete at least for a wild card, and if we're really lucky, maybe the division.
Well, I'm just checking the schedule out. They open up against the Cowboys, and then they play the Bills, and then they play the Bucks down here. So maybe I can go to that game. But they jump in the fire in the first week playing the Cowboys at Dallas.
And I know they played New England at some point.
Yeah, that's like the 6th game.
Yeah, I think they have a stretch against before their bye week that might be pretty hard.
But so have you heard anything like from the camps or anything? How's Daniel Jones doing, or any word coming out up there?
He's picking up the playbook well. He's got a nice arm. He does hold on to the ball a little long, but that's to be expected given he's a rookie and he's still learning. But watching him in college, the one thing he does do a lot is he runs a lot, and he doesn't slide and he doesn't go out of bounds. And he can't play that way in the NFL. If he plays the way he did in college, he'll get hurt. Because you have to get down or get out of bounds if you're going to run with the football. if you're a quarterback. You can't try to run through players. And in college, he never slid and never tried to get out of bounds. He always tried to run through the opponent.
Yeah, and that's a skill too. Somebody better teach him how to slide.
Yeah. Because I mean, the one thing you could say about Eli, he's always been available, and like they say in the NFL, availability, or whatever that's saying, availability is ability, or something like that.
Yeah, he's hardly ever missed a game. I mean, I don't remember the last time he missed a game. I know he got benched last season, the game. But
yeah, that was the only game he missed, was the game that he got benched.
Wow.
And like I said, last season he was his career high in sacks prior to last season was 37 in 2013. And through the first 8 games last year, he was sacked 31 times. He was on pace to be sacked over 60 times. And he led the NFL in sacks with 14 in 2.5 seconds or less. Eli in the first half of the season last year just did not have time to throw the football. The Giants couldn't even run the ball. Saquon Barkley had 20 carries in week 1. And then in the next 7 games, he never had more than 14 carries in a game because the Giants just couldn't run block. It wasn't until the second half that the line started playing better with the addition of Jamal Brown that they claimed off of waivers during the bye week. And in the second half of the season, Barkley ran better. Manning had better protection through 13 touchdowns in the second half, and the Giants were able to put up points, which is why this offensive line they got now, with the addition of some of the guys they acquired, they should be able to put up points. And Eli should be able to have a productive year because he could still throw the football. There's no question about that. I just like to see him go out with one more winning season with the Giants.
Now, who do they have receivers? How's the receiving corps?
They picked up Golden Tate. They signed Golden Tate, and they have Sterling Shepard, and their other receivers are really a collection of guys who are roster fillers, like Cody Lattimore and Russell Shepard. They do have Evan Ingram at tight end, who's got a lot of potential. But Eli's always been able to throw the ball to any receiver he has. I mean, Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard are really good receivers. They're both suited for the slot, which is kind of strange that they signed Tate, but Tate's a really good veteran receiver. Shepard's a really young, good receiver, along with Evan Ingram and Saquon in the backfield. I mean, they should be able to move the ball up and down the field.
Well, at least they should be an exciting team to watch.
Yeah. I mean, Barkley is something. I mean, he is. He's going to be good, and as long as they have that running game, the passing game things will open up for him in the passing game for sure. But as a Giant fan, it's just to watch Eli have to struggle the way he has the last several years, and to have people point the finger at him. It's just I don't get it, and it bothers me. I mean, under McAdoo, Eli had one of the fastest releases in the NFL. In fact, he led the NFL at the fastest release time in 2017 with a 2.4 second release time. I mean, he just didn't have time to throw the football. He didn't have a running game. I mean, it was just unfair the way he's been treated in the press and the media the last couple of years. But he's handled it with class,
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of the Giant games on TV, and I mean, he just had no time to throw.
No.
And then when he did have time, they would drop the ball. So.
Yeah, and Eli, since 2014, Eli has the second most drop passes in the NFL behind David Carr. He might actually be ahead of David Carr now. I'm not sure, but he's had a problem with drop passes. Evan Ingram in 2017 led all tight ends in drop passes, and he was among the NFL leaders in drop passes. So, I mean, that's been a problem, too. When guys were open, they're dropping passes.
Yeah, I've read about that, and I've seen it in the lowlights of, Giant receivers dropping passes left and right. How many years you been a Giant fan, Robert?
I became a Giant fan in the mid-'80s when I saw number 56 terrorizing players on the field. I can remember that, watching TV with my dad. So I've been a Giants fan since about 86 is when I became a Giants fan. I remember that Super Bowl against Denver.
Yeah, that was amazing with Phil Simms. What a game he had, and McConkey, and Mark Navarro, and LT, and Parcells, and it was fantastic. No, Robert, I remember watching the Giants in 1965. And
was Frank Gifford a part of that team?
No, thank God Frank retired before that, because I believe they had Earl Morrall as quarterback, and they were 7-7. And the next year they won one game, and in 14 games they gave up 514 points.
Wow.
They lost games to the Redskins 72-41. It was bad. And then after that, they had Fran Tarkington, like the late 60s, and they had some good seasons. And then through the 70s, they were just a nightmare. And then they got Phil Simms in 79 and LT. And, Phil was getting hurt a lot early in his career. And Parcells struggled his first year. There was even chance he wasn't going to coach football anymore. And but they turned around in the early 80s. And, if you'd like to share some stories of the 86 team, go right ahead, Robert. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, yeah. Parcells, I remember seeing, a documentary on him in 85. There was, after that season, there was talk about him being fired. And I think he told Simms, because I think he benched Simms in 85, and he told Simms going into 86 that he's going to do things his way, and that, I'm going with you, so be ready. And once he started coaching his way and not trying to please everybody, things started to turn around for him pretty quickly. I mean, he did have a hell of a defense, too. And Belichick was a fantastic coordinator. I mean, the game plans that he came up with to stop Barry Sanders and those receivers in that one playoff game was remarkable.
Yeah, I remember one year they beat the 49ers 49-3 in the playoffs.
Yeah, I still remember that hit on Joe Montana. I mean, that was a brutal hit, and it basically was the beginning of the end for his 49er career.
Yeah, I mean, it was so, like I said, I've always liked the Giants, and there was so many long-suffering fans up there in the tri-state area. It was just a great thing when the Giants, finally won the Super Bowl. I was happy for the fans, for Wellington Mara, the owner, and I mean, it was it's a great thing.
Yeah, and even because I don't remember the 70s, but apparently the 70s were really a brutal time for Giant fans, even into the early 80s. But Parcells, I mean, he did a great job, especially that 92 season when they won with Jeff Hostetler. I mean, that was a great season too. Great coaching.
Yeah. I mean, the second Super Bowl. I mean, I believe the Giants were 12-1 or 12-2, and Phil Simms got hurt in week 14 or 15 against the Bills, and then Hostetler stepped in, and they beat the Bills down here in Tampa. Missed the field goal and.
Yeah, Scott Norwood missed it right.
Yeah, I'll share a Giant story with you, Robert. It was hard to get Giant tickets. It's always been hard. So I went to a few preseason games. But did you ever hear about the Joe Pisarcik play?
No.
The Giants were ahead, and all he had to do was get the ball and lay down, and they would have won the game. So he went to hand the ball off, I believe, to Zonka. It hit Zonka in the hip, and Herman Edwards, who was a Jet coach.
Yeah, I've seen that play.
Yeah, and he ran in for the touchdown. So, and the fans were going crazy. So my neighbor John, he got his tickets for the next Giant home game. and they were playing the Rams, and the tickets were $9. We got them for $20. And Pisarcik, of course, was struggling, and the fans were yelling for Randy Dean, the backup quarterback. We want Dean. We want Dean. So they put Dean in the game. He throws a little pass to the tight end for 5 yards. Next play, he tries the same pass, and it gets picked off and run for a touchdown.
Oh, my God.
So, I mean, that's what the years were like in the 1970s. It was just, it was brutal. It
must
was
have been.
awful.
Yeah, that's why after our last Super Bowl victory in 2012, 2013 was a bad year. Our running game was ranked 30th, but we drafted Odell in 2014. Our running game went from 30th to 23rd. Eli threw 30 touchdowns. 2015, our running game went from 23rd to 18th. Eli threw 35 touchdowns, but the Giants' defense in 2015 gave up the most points in Giants history and was one of the worst defenses in NFL history, and it cost Tom Coughlin his job. And the hiring of Ben McAdoo, which at the time seemed like a good idea, but turned out to be just a horrible mistake. I mean, the offense that was being run under Coughlin was working, and the running game went from 18th to 30th. In McAdoo's first year, he just abandoned the run completely for some reason. And he had Eli in the 11 personnel, shotgun 95% of the time. I mean, the Giants were lucky to make playoffs that year. They had a weak schedule, and they won a lot of games, a lot of close games, and the defense played above their ability. But I think Coughlin, if they would have kept him and spent that money improving that defense, things would have been different. And we'd be a different Giant team today if Tom Coughlin never got fired.
Yeah, didn't Coughlin, he's in Jacksonville now?
Yeah, he's president of operations, I think. But he knows football. He comes from the Parcells coaching tree.
Well, he's been around for a long time. And
yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about, Robert? Or
no, I had fun though, Jack. Thanks.
No, anytime. I mean, I enjoy it. You know, we can talk about any sport you want. Just don't talk about the Knicks.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, let's hope that Kevin Durant does come to New York.
You know, the thing is, Robert, I mean, if they had a winning team in New York, they would own that town. Because
they would.
The New York fans, they love basketball. I mean, because I remember growing up, I remember Bill Bradley and Willis Reed and DeBusschere and Frazier and all these guys. And, you know, even the era when they had, Patrick Ewing and Starks and everything. And they've just been a nightmare for I don't know, 15, 20 years. And, I mean, the ownership there is a disgrace.
Yeah, it really is.
I hope they get a couple free agents and they can turn it around.
Yeah, I hope so too, because New York basketball, it's missing. It used to be front and center, and it's missing. You know. Yeah,
and there's nothing like a basketball game at the Garden and a hockey game too. I mean, it's just it's one of the greatest memories of sports I have. It's just something terrific.
Yeah. All right, Jack. Next week we'll be talking with Wayne, right?
I believe so. I think Wayne is up in New York vacationing, so we'll play it by ear. We'll see what happens.
Sounds good. And the Yankees this week, like I said, they play San Diego and they got 4 at Boston. So it should be a good week of baseball.
Yeah, it's been exciting so far, and I hope it keeps up.
And did I hear right? Dustin Pedroia of the Red Sox is retiring, or at least not playing.
Well, what I understand, Robert, he's taken a leave, just to figure out what he's going to do. And I mean, it's just a shame because he was a terrific player. I mean, I used to love watching him. You know, he'd bring it every game, and he was well on to a Hall of Fame career, and you just can't come back from those injuries.
Yeah, he was one of those players whose uniform was dirty every game. He was a true player.
Yeah.
Okay, Jack, this has been great.
Okay, Robert, it's always a lot of fun, and you have a great week.
You too, Jack. Everyone, take care.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.